Christmas Eve dinner at Burger King. Sounds innocent enough, right? Not my first choice, but I had to work late, and being Christmas Eve, it looked to be my best choice. I got finished working at 9 and had some coupons for Burger King, so that made my decision for me. When I got to Burger King, I noticed it was still open, but the dining room was shut down. The only way I could get something is if I went through the drive-thru. Only problem is I don't have a car. I tried to walk up to the drive-thru and place my order, but the compassionate young lady working the drive-thru wasn't having it. She told me if I didn't have a vehicle, I couldn't use the drive-thru. I became rather aggravated and began saying things I'm not proud of. At that moment, an older woman wearing shining armor appeared on the scene and offered me to jump into her car and order my food. At first, I turned her down, not wanting to be a bother, but after some convincing, I decided to accept her help. And after ordering my food, it took so long to get it that I missed my bus and got upset. So the nice woman offered me a ride home, and I kind of felt off-put by the offer and declined. She was persistent, but at the same time nice, and convinced me to take her offer. Mind you, I am a 250-pound 30-year-old man and really didn't feel that threatened by a 50-year-old woman. If the circumstances were different, I would have not taken the ride. After I told her where I lived, we proceeded home. About 5 minutes from my house, she made a wrong turn. I explained that I lived the other way and that we needed to turn around or let me out here, and I could walk the rest of the way. It was then that the woman's demeanor changed, and she told me that she could not let me spend Christmas Eve alone and that she was taking me to her house. I told her I needed to get home immediately to let my dog out and that I would be fine. The woman then tried to entice me with cocaine and liquor at her place, but since I'm in recovery, I told her I wasn't interested. She refused to turn around or let me out, and started to drive strangely, not stopping at stop signs, and I'm not gonna lie, my mind was racing and I began to sweat. I knew that I could physically overpower this woman, but what awaited me at her house? I also felt bad about hurting her after all her kindness, but I had to get away before her house, and I didn't know where that was. So I didn't have much time to find out. Then all of a sudden, luckily, the car in front was stopped at a stop sign, and across from it was another stopped also. She had to slow down, almost at a stop at this point, to where I made my break, jumping out of the car, still moving, and leaving my food in the car and taking off running. As I was running, she stopped, got out of the car, and began to try and talk to me into getting back in with her. That just wasn't an option. I didn't know what her motives were or who she was, but I knew I wasn't willing to risk my life over it. I ran all the way home and made sure I wasn't followed. What would have happened to me if it was 2 years earlier and I was still doing drugs and drinking? Her offer of cocaine and booze would have probably worked. Kidnapping, murder, sex trafficking, organ trading, or something else. Being a man, the thought of the vulnerability most women face every day was so foreign to me that I now understand the fear most women face. I really feel this nice woman had a nefarious purpose. Thinking about it, the ruse of such a non-threatening bait would be perfect to lower the guard of a prospective victim. Any thoughts would be appreciated. I never went to the cops because I thought they might not believe me or look down on me for being scared in this situation. What if, by not reporting this, someone else ends up hurt? Or whatever didn't happen to me happened to them? When I was 17, I worked at an indoor pool as a lifeguard. I had 2 very strange encounters while working at that establishment, but the one I am about to share certainly takes the cake. First, a little foreshadowing, as the details are important. I was dating a boy at the time who was chill as hell, and he had an absolutely crazy older brother. The way we met was mad. I was hanging out in said boyfriend's room,
the small Italian-style fast food dive just off of campus,
and one of his cousins bursts into the room. and asks me to come to the bathroom immediately. A look of shock clearly plastered on his face. I got up and joined him outside the small bathroom. The thing that sticks with me the most was that I saw blood everywhere, and I mean everywhere. "You're a lifeguard, right?" the man bleeding over the sink asked me. Yeah," I replied sheepishly. "So you know first aid then?" "Of course." I don't know why, but then I kicked into training mode and began cleaning his bloodied hands to find the source of the flow. We'd sat in silence mostly. I was afraid to ask many questions. I cleaned and bandaged him up to the best of my ability. Later I found out from my boyfriend that his brother had been drinking that night along with doing some other drugs. Apparently he got pissed off and went into full rage mode and destroyed his apartment with his bare hands. Crazy, I know. Well, one day, a pretty long time after, he saw me outside while I was over one night and approached me. I was in my car adding water, and he then proceeded to tell me he really appreciated what I did for him that night, and he had to repay me somehow. He went to my driver's side and tucked something in between the door and seat and said, "Have a good night," and that was that. I was busy with my car issues and forgot about the encounter. I honestly thought it was just some good bud, but I was wrong. It was a meat cleaver. Back to the pool now. It was late fall or early winter, therefore the pools were never too crowded this time of year, and you get to know the regulars. I was befriended by a boy maybe a few years older than me, called Jack. We had a lot in common, and despite him looking like a creep, we got on well enough. He never gave me any reason to fear him. We mostly talked about music, and he commented on how mature I was for my age compared to other girls. Again, this never alarmed me, because I heard this a lot from people. 10 years on, I still do. One day it was freezing and pouring down with rain. My shift was ending soon, and Jack had mentioned he had to walk home as his ride bailed on him. I said, "The hell you are? You live close? I can give you a lift." He agreed to wait for my shift to end and hitch a ride. He told me where he lived, and I was familiar with the community. I got changed into my clothes. I wore silly goth clothes from Hot Topic. The pants were parachute and clasped, with a snap button and zipper. We left, and I headed to the community he said he lives in. As we approached, I put my blinker on, and he said, "No, keep going." Boom. Red flag. The only thing ahead past this development were fields and the occasional farmhouse. I spoke up and said, "Dude, you said you live here." He responded that it was only a little past here and that he used it as a landmark. Okay, fine. We kept going about 3 minutes, and after he said, "This is me on the left." I was somewhat relieved to see it was a cluster of wealthy-looking houses maybe 3 acres apart. Better than the center of nowhere, I suppose. We pulled into the driveway, and I noticed there were no cars, which I guess makes sense since he did say his ride bailed. I put the car in park, and he pulled my parking brake up. "What the?" I tried to say, but I couldn't because the creep grabbed my hair and forced a kiss on me. I forgot to mention this fool had a grill so yellow, he made Big Bird look white. Anywho, I was trying to bite him, pull away and slap him, but he was much stronger than me. He forced his hand to the opening of my pants, and the snap betrayed me, and I was reaching to my left at this point, remembering Big Brother's gift. I screamed and told him to get off me, and whipped that sucker out so fast and slammed it into my steering wheel. It sliced into it all the way to the metal. The look on his face was priceless. He started to mumble and panic, not making much sense, and then he reached for my hand, So I pulled the cleaver out and went blindly swung it. I had no other option. I nicked the part of his hand where the thumb joins, and he yelped out in pain. "Get the hell out!" I screamed, the words trembling and barely able to escape me. He hesitated, but starting to get out, and started cussing me, calling me all kinds of colourful words. I was shaking like a leaf at this point and holding back tears. He slammed my door. I put the car in reverse and tore out the driveway. Then wham, I hit something. Hard enough to stop my car. Shit. I destroyed the mailbox. In my terror, I misjudged the driveway. He came running at me, hands up and screaming at me like, "What the hell?" My window was down and I heard him say, "You're gonna pay for that." I screamed, "Shove it up your butt," or something equally colourful, and got the hell out of there. I drove straight to my boyfriend's, visibly shaken and crying at this point, and told him everything. I only saw Jack once more at a gas station late at night, and he just glared at me. I was with friends and begged them to leave. Haven't seen him since. So Jack, let's not meet again.
When I was in 7th grade, I wasn't stupid. I knew when someone was watching me, and I definitely wasn't ugly. I played soccer, went to the gym, stayed in shape, and I looked good. I just wish I had loved myself a little more back then. But that's besides the point. I was very obviously underage because my face looked about 10. I always had a backpack on, and my school was directly next to the Starbucks where this creep worked. I had just moved, and unlike my old school, this one wouldn't let students inside early, which was awful because school started at 8:40, but my mom dropped me off at 7:10 on her way to work, meaning I had to sit outside for over an hour in Texas heat, humidity, or pouring rain. So, to avoid that, she started dropping me off at the Starbucks right next to the school. And this wasn't unusual at all, since tons of middle schoolers and even elementary school kids from the connected campus would go there. So, if you saw a young girl with a backpack, it was extremely obvious she wasn't an adult. I've always been really awkward in new environments, so the first day I went there, I was too embarrassed to take up a seat inside that a paying customer might want, so I sat outside alone in the sweltering heat for an hour. And I regret that decision so much, because that's when he noticed me, the creep, and he saw me sitting there by myself and realized I was an easy target. He came outside and started talking to me, complimenting my long hair and my beautiful face. And when he asked for my name, I told him I wasn't comfortable giving it. And after that, it felt like he made it his personal mission to find out who I was. Over the next few days, I eventually worked up the nerve to sit inside, and that's when things got worse, because he wouldn't leave me alone. He started making me free drinks without asking, talking to me constantly, hovering around me in a way that made me feel guilty and sick at the same time, because I hated accepting free things, and I didn't like the attention. And I could tell he wasn't just being nice. It felt like he was hitting on me, which made everything so much more uncomfortable. About a month in, I even wrote in my journal about him, because it was bothering me that much. I wrote about how the new school felt too new and too weird, and how this worker wouldn't leave me alone. How he kept making me drinks and talking to me, and how I felt guilty and sick, and I specifically remember one day where he took it even further. I walked into Starbucks, and he was cleaning up while controlling the music, and as soon as he saw me, he started singing, badly, about me, about what I was wearing, about my long hair like I was Rapunzel or something, and people were literally watching. And he had already made my drink before I even ordered it, because he knew my schedule like clockwork, and I felt so exposed and uncomfortable that instead of sitting where I usually did, facing the counter, I sat with my back to him so he couldn't see my face, and when it got too busy, I just snuck out. The guilty part I wrote about came from how I was raised. I was always called spoiled by my older sister. So I got used to saying no to things people offered me, especially free things. But with him, I couldn't avoid it, because he would just hand them to me anyway. Then things escalated even more, because he started asking people about me, trying to figure out who I was. And one day my social studies teacher came in wearing his lanyard and ID, and after making his drink, the creep pointed at me and asked for my name, and my teacher just casually said it and left, not realizing anything was wrong. And the next day when I walked in, the creep called out to me using my name. But he said it wrong, like Jakota. And my stomach dropped because I had never told him that. And then as I was leaving, he called me over to the counter and pushed a big hot drink toward me, which confused me because I had already had mine and I didn't even like hot drinks. And when I asked what it was for, he told me to give it to my teacher as a thank you for telling him my name. And I remember feeling completely frazzled and uncomfortable and just off, so I gave the drink back and left. By that point, I was genuinely scared of him, even if I didn't fully admit it to myself. And I even wrote in my journal in this dramatic way about how everyone has that one person they'd do anything for, one person who makes them question their sanity, and one person they'll never admit they're scared of. And for me, it was the Starbucks worker. After that, I became hyper-aware of him. I would watch where he was, avoid eye contact, keep my hood up, and only go into Starbucks on Wednesdays because I figured out he didn't work that day. And I remember one time after school, I saw him outside talking to two women who were sitting and smoking, and he was just standing over them smiling. And even though they were adults with kids, something about the way he carried himself still made my skin crawl, and I stayed near the window, trying not to be seen while also not being able to stop looking at him. The entire time, he only ever treated me this way. No one else. And he knew I was a minor, which made everything worse. He constantly told me I was beautiful, kept giving me free drinks that he was clearly paying for himself, probably spending over $100 on me over time. And at one point, he even asked if I wanted to know his name. But he wasn't wearing a name tag. And I didn't say yes, because I didn't want to give him the wrong idea or make him think I was interested, even though the only reason I wanted to know was so I could warn other people about him. Even after that year ended, when I was in 8th grade, I still saw him sometimes in passing. And every time I did, I felt that same fear and discomfort all over again, like I was being watched. And all I could think, every single time, was that I never wanted to see him again.